Hey everyone, so I just turned in my Our Fantasy Book Bingo card for 2020, so I thought I would share with you all what my card looked like this year. I've been doing this book bingo for a couple years now under my other username, and yeah, it's always a ton of fun. I haven't actually managed to complete a full card yet, and I definitely don't go all out with like strategizing and stuff like I know some folks do, but still, it's a lot of fun, so I thought I would share my card with you guys. Yeah, for anyone who's never heard of the Our Fantasy Book Bingo before, I'll put some links down in the description or in the comment section for you. But basically, this book bingo runs from April to April. So, Book Bingo 2020 ran from April 1st, 2020 to March 31st, 2021. And if you get a bingo, you get to enter yourself in a contest for a prize. Pretty exciting. Or if you complete your full card, you also get to use the Reading Champion flair on the subreddit. So at the beginning of the book bingo year, the organizers basically make a new thread with the new card, and it's usually stickied at the top for a while. And all you really need to do to participate is to, fill out your card and turn it in at the end of the year. You can also post in like the various threads that pop up from time to time, just kind of to update people or to give or receive recommendations on books that meet different criteria and all that. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. You can also kind of plan as little or as much as you want. Some people, for example, do multiple cards. Other people do themed cards. So yeah, you can kind of go all out or kind of do the basics. Personally, I just kind of do the basics, but yeah, I know a lot of people who get super into it as far as like multiple cards and all that kind of thing. So to use a book for a particular square, it just basically needs to be speculative fiction. So it could be fantasy, it could be sci-fi, horror, dystopian fiction, anything that falls under speculative fiction, essentially. It also needs to meet the square's criteria. So, for example, a book that features exploration or a book that has a color in the title. So those are some examples. Um, you also need to have read the book between the two Aprils. So for example, for this year, April 2020 and April 2021. It also can't be a reread. I do actually think there's one spot allocated to rereads, but you can't do more than one reread. And you're not allowed to repeat authors or books. So they have to be separate authors. Oh, so I guess only one entry per author, if that makes sense. There's also a hard mode that you can tick when you're turning in your card at the end too, that's kind of fun as well. So with all that said, let's get to my Bingo 2020 or Book Bingo 2020 card. What did mine look like? So the first square is a novel translated from its original language. I didn't actually complete that square this year. I planned to use Season of Storms by Andrei Sapkowski, but I never actually got to it in time. So if this square repeats itself on the Bingo 2021 card, then I'll probably use this one for 2021, just because I do plan to read it this spring. So square number 2 is setting featuring snow, ice, or cold. So for this square, I used Guardians of the Keep by Carol Berg. So some parts of this book take place in a very warm location, but significant parts of the book also take place in cold or wintry locations too. So that's why this one fits. This is also part of her Bridge of Darnaz series for anyone curious. I talked about Son of Avanar in a previous video on underrated fantasy. And I'll probably do a series wrap up for this too at some point soon. So the next square is optimistic sci-fi fantasy. So for this square I used To Say Nothing of the Dog by Connie Willis. And this book is a funny mix of historical fiction and sci-fi, and is part of her Oxford Time Travelers series. Most of them are pretty standalone, which is, I would say, like this is one of the few series I would ever say is like, yeah, they're standalone novels. But yeah, in this version of our world, time travel is possible. So you even have university departments who will send historians back in time to collect information and that kind of thing. So this one is really, really funny. And even though the protagonist and the characters run into some troubles, it's definitely a very light, optimistic, uplifting book, and yeah, very humorous as well. The protagonist is basically taking a vacation from seeking out this elusive artifact, the Bishop's Bird Stump, and him and his team have been looking for this thing. They can't find it. And he is now suffering from the time travel version of jet lag, so he goes back into the Victorian times to kind of take a little bit of a break to recover from his jet lag. So yeah, it's really funny. Definitely recommend it. And actually, this one I hit the hard mode. Hard mode was a book that was not by Becky Chambers, and this one clearly is not. So, yeah. The next square was novel featuring necromancy. For this one, I used Promise of the Witch King by R.A. Salvatore. So, this is part of the Drizzt series. It's the second book in the Sellswords subseries, and which is kind of like a spin off of the Drizzt series. And it's also, if you actually include it in the Drizzt series, it's book 18 in order of publication. So I've been rereading this series over the last couple of years, and I've now kind of finally caught up to the point where I originally stopped reading in the late 2000s. But yeah, this one hits uh, that necromancy criteria, and it actually also hits hard mode because hard mode is protagonist is a necromancer. So in this case, one of the two protagonists engages in necromancy. The two protagonists here are Jarl Axel and Artemis Entreri. They're kind of the main characters, but yeah, one of them engages in necromancy. So the last square in this row was ace or aromantic speculative fiction. And I actually decided to replace this one, which that is another option. You can replace a total of one square with a square from a previous year. So this one I replaced with a novel featuring twins. And the book I used to fill that one is Legion by Dan Abnett, and that's book 7 of the Horus Heresy series in Warhammer 40k books. So this was probably my least favorite of the series, of the Horus Heresy series so far, but still a pretty good read. A book that deals with Alpha Legion, so for anyone who is aware of Alpha Legion and who their Primarch is, yeah, you'll probably know um, why I used this book for this square. So the first square in this row is novel featuring a ghost, and I used Dead Voices by Catherine Arden for this one. So this is a horror novel featuring ghosts, and it's aimed at middle school kids. I don't usually read kids' books personally, but I love Catherine Arden's writing, so I definitely have been following this Small Spaces series just because, yeah, I can't get enough of her writing, regardless of whether it's general audience or whatnot. Next square, novel featuring exploration, another Horus Heresy book. So I used Mechanicum by Graham McNeill. And for those that don't know, Horus Heresy is written by a number of different authors, so that's why I've been able to use two books from the same series in this one. But yeah, this is book 9 of the series, and most of this book doesn't actually involve exploration, but one of the main POVs does eventually embark upon an exploratory mission that results in some pretty cool and interesting, significant even revelations within the Warhammer universe. And especially if you're like me and you haven't actually played the games, then it's probably even more interesting or more of a revelation. Anyways, next square, climate fiction. I didn't actually read anything that could be called climate fiction this year, and I'm not even sure I added anything from my 2020 list that would really fit this. So square number 4 is novel with a color in the title. I used Silver Tide by Jen Williams for this one, and it's pretty self-explanatory, I guess. I also included this book in my underrated fantasy rec video the other month if anybody's interested. But yeah, I highly recommend this series if you like kind of fun adventure fantasy that swings a little bit more towards sword and sorcery than epic fantasy, at least in my view. But yeah, I also used hard mode on this one because hard mode was a color other than black, red, gray, or white. And I guess silver sneaks in there. Um, it's silver is not gray, I guess, so yeah. So the last square in this row is any Our Fantasy Book Club book of the month or read-along book. And so I did not complete that square. I had originally planned to use Inda for this square, but I didn't get to it in time. So we'll see if I can fit that one into next year's card. The first square of this row is a self-published sci-fi fantasy novel. So I used Demons Within by Ash Armstrong for this one. This is the third book in the Grim Luck Demon Hunter series. I don't think I've talked about this on book 2 before, but it is a really fun series, I thought. This is about an orc named Grimluck, and he is a demon hunter, as the title might suggest. The setting is a secondary fantasy world that's somewhat reminiscent of the American Wild West. So kind of like how Alloy of Law in the Mistborn series by Sanderson is also kind of in a Wild Westy-ish setting while also being in a secondary world. Um, Same thing with Grimlook here. I also think this book would actually be a good recommendation for queer and trans youth, mostly because of the way Ash has pretty seamlessly, I thought, incorporated different relationships and identities into the books without explicitly naming them or like dwelling on them, in the sense that they're obviously accepted in the world. Basically, I guess what I'm trying to say is being straight isn't really considered the default in this world in the same way it is in ours, and being trans or non-binary is not considered out of the ordinary either. Like other characters don't really bat an eye. And this also hits the or ticks the hard mode box because the hard mode for this one is having under 50 ratings on Goodreads, and this one sadly has only 10 ratings on Goodreads. Next square we have is novel with chapter epigraphs. No books on my radar from this past year had chapters with epigraphs, so did not complete that card. Next one is novel published in 2020. I also did not complete that square because I didn't read any novels published in 2020 last year or this past year. I'm not really someone who generally focuses on a lot of new releases, so like I do get to things eventually, but often not in the same year that they're published. So yeah, did not complete that square. Got a lot of not completes here. Novel set in a school or university. Also no book with this setting on my list for this particular year, although there is a Carol Berg series called Collegia Magica that I'd eventually like to read, but yeah, nothing for this year. Next square, book about books. Also did not complete. I didn't read any books specifically about books. The only one that could have fit, I think, is Promise of the Witch King, but I already used that for necromancy, so yeah. So first square of the next row, a book that made you laugh. So I chose The Chimes by Charles Dickens, and that one's kind of in a similar spirit as Christmas Carol, basically a Christmas season slash New Year's comedy that touches on social issues, and more specifically oppression of the poor and working class people in capitalist industrial England. And this also hit the hard mode box because hard mode, I believe, was not Terry Pratchett. Charles Dickens is not Terry Pratchett. So next square, five sci-fi fantasy short stories. I chose Weird Tales Volume 1. This is one of my Halloween reads. I actually talked about it in my Halloween reads video. And it features horror, sci-fi, and fantasy from 1930s editions of Weird Tales magazine. So my favorites here, in case anyone's curious, were The Man Who Returned by Edmund Hamilton, Beyond the Phoenix by Henry Kuttner, Beyond the Walls of Sleep by Lovecraft, and The Garden of Adonpha by Clark Ashton Smith. Honorable mention to Frozen Beauty by Seabury Quinn because it was hilarious. But yeah, hard mode for this one as well because this was in anthology or collection. So yeah, more hard mode. Next square is Big Dumb Object, and I used Crown of Renewal by Elizabeth Moon for this one, and this is the last book of Moon's 10-book Paxenarian series. And basically something about, without giving spoilers, basically something about the Doran Verakai storyline is what makes this fit this square. I also did a video on the full Pax series, kind of like a wrap-up of the full 10-book series, so I won't say too much here. But yeah, great series, highly recommend it. Next square on this row is feminist novel, and I chose Mind of My Mind by Octavia Butler, and that is book 2 in Octavia Butler's Patternist series, if you're reading in order of publication or according to internal chronological order. Yeah, I won't say too much about this book because I also did a video on that whole series, but yeah, it also ticks the hard mode box because hard mode was feminist novel by a person of color or indigenous author, and so yeah, Octavia Butler's Mind of My Mind fits. So next square on this row is novel by a Canadian author. I chose Empire of Wild by Cherie Dimaline. This was the second book by her that I've read, and personally this was easily my favorite. Marrow Thieves felt a little bit too much like it was written for a younger teen audience. For my tastes, mostly to do with the writing style more than anything, but this book was completely different. This is basically what I would call unconventional werewolf fiction. So it's about a Métis woman in her mid-30s. Her husband recently has gone missing, and everyone else kind of gave up looking for him, thinking either he's dead or he's kind of taken off on her. But yeah, it's inspired by Métis Loup-garou folklore, and it's, for me, I thought it was a pretty gripping read. Also, kind of a balance between humor and some sad moments too. But yeah, great read. Definitely recommend it. Novel with a number in the title, so that is the next square. I didn't get to this one. I had originally planned to read Thousand Suns, which is book 12 of Horus Heresy, but yeah, didn't get this one. Next square, romantic fantasy slash paranormal fantasy. I was never going to complete that square. I'm not a big fan of romance novels or paranormal romance or fantasy that is very romance heavy. Only time I really like romance is kind of Georgian and Victorian Gothic fiction or romances like Jane Austen's books, for example, just for like kind of the dramatic entertainment value. But otherwise, I have a pretty low tolerance for romance in my books, especially in fantasy more than anything. So next square, also did not complete it. Novel with a magical pet. I could have used Surrender None by Elizabeth Moon, but I had already used another Elizabeth Moon book, so could not use that one. Next one, format, graphic novel or audiobook. Another did not complete, just because I'm not really into audiobooks, and I'm not super into graphic novels either. So yeah. Final square, novel featuring politics. I used The Iron Heel by Jack London for this one, and that's another book I did a video on not long ago, so I won't say too much. But yeah, this is anti-capitalist dystopian fiction published in 1908 by Jack London, who is most widely known for White Fang and Call of the Wild. So definitely a very political book, needless to say. Hard mode, it also kind of ticks that hard mode box too because it does not involve royalty, which was the condition for that. No royalty in this one, just wealthy capitalists, which are, I guess, in a way, acting as the new aristocracy, but for all intents and purposes, no royalty in this one, so hard mode, check. Anyways, that is the full list of my bingo card, my Our Fantasy Book Bingo 2020 card. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. And if you have participated yourself in Book Bingo, feel free to like link in the comments or let us know a little bit about what you read for Book Bingo this year. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.